She had 3 weeks to live. At least, that's what she told him. The machines were beeping steadily in that cold hospital room, and he stood there, frozen, watching the woman he was supposed to marry in just 42 days, lying pale and fragile in that bed. But here's what he didn't know. She wasn't dying. She was perfectly healthy. And what she discovered from his reaction in those final moments before she opened her eyes again would shatter everything they had built together. This is the story of a test that went too far, a love that was questioned, and a truth that no one saw coming. Her name was Amara. 28 years old, a marketing consultant living in Houston, Texas, with a smile that could light up a room and a heart that believed in fairy tales. His name was Daniel. 31, an architect with a quiet confidence, the kind of man who remembered anniversaries and left handwritten notes on the kitchen counter. They met at a mutual friend's birthday party 3 years ago, and by the end of the night, they were talking about everything from childhood dreams to the meaning of home. 6 months later, he proposed on a rooftop overlooking the city, with string lights and a saxophone player he had hired just for her. Everyone said they were perfect together. Her mother cried at the engagement party. His father gave a toast about finding the one. The wedding was set for May 19th, a spring ceremony at a botanical garden with 200 guests, a live band, and a cake that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But beneath all that perfection, Amara had started to feel something she couldn't quite name, a nagging doubt, a whisper in the back of her mind that asked the question she was terrified to answer. Did he really love her, or was he just in love with the idea of her? It started small, little things that didn't add up. Daniel had always been attentive, but over the last few months, he seemed distracted. He would check his phone during dinner and smile at texts he didn't explain. He would come home late from the office, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. When she asked him about it, he would kiss her forehead and say he was just stressed about a big project. But stress doesn't make you smile at your phone like that. Stress doesn't make you hide your screen when someone walks into the room. Amara tried to shake it off. She told herself she was being paranoid, that wedding jitters were normal, that love meant trust. But trust is a fragile thing, and once the crack appears, it spreads. One night, 2 months before the wedding, she was lying in bed scrolling through social media when she saw a photo of Daniel at a restaurant she didn't recognize. He was tagged by someone named Jessica, a woman Amara had never heard of. The caption said, "Great catching up with you." Amara clicked on Jessica's profile. She was beautiful, confident, the kind of woman who posted inspirational quotes and photos of herself traveling to places Amara had only dreamed of. And there, buried in the older photos, was a picture of Jessica and Daniel from years ago, arms around each other, laughing. An ex. He had never mentioned her. When Amara asked him about it the next morning, Daniel barely looked up from his coffee. He said Jessica was an old friend, that they had reconnected to talk about a project she was working on, that it was nothing. But nothing doesn't make your fiancé lie to you. Nothing doesn't make you delete text messages. And that's when Amara made the decision that would change everything. She was going to test him. She was going to find out if the man she was about to marry loved her enough to stay when things got hard. So she decided to fake her own death. Well, not death exactly, but close enough. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Amara's younger sister Claire thought she had lost her mind. They were sitting in Claire's apartment on a rainy Tuesday evening when Amara laid out the plan. Claire stared at her like she had just suggested robbing a bank. She said, "You want to fake a terminal illness to test your fiancé? Are you hearing yourself right now?" But Amara was calm. She had thought this through. She explained that she wasn't going to go all the way with it, just enough to see how Daniel reacted under pressure. Would he stay by her side? Would he cancel the wedding and focus on her? Or would he pull away, reveal his true colors, show that he was only there for the good times? Claire shook her head and said, "This is insane. If he finds out, it's over. You know that, right?" Amara nodded. She knew, but she also knew that marrying someone she didn't fully trust would be worse than any breakup. So she reached out to an old college friend, Marcus, who worked as a physician assistant at a private clinic. She told him what she needed: a fake diagnosis, medical paperwork, something convincing enough to make Daniel believe her life was in danger. Marcus was hesitant at first, but Amara convinced him it was for her peace of mind, that she just needed closure, that she would come clean as soon as she knew the truth. He agreed, reluctantly, on the condition that she would only use the paperwork for a few days and then destroy it, Amara promised. 2 weeks later, she had everything she needed: a fabricated medical report diagnosing her with a rare and aggressive form of cardiomyopathy, a condition that weakened the heart and could lead to sudden death. The prognosis was grim: 3 weeks, maybe a month if she was lucky. The paperwork looked official, complete with clinic stamps and doctor signatures. It was terrifyingly real. And now, all she had to do was tell Daniel. She waited until a quiet Sunday evening. They were sitting on the couch in their apartment, a half-finished bottle of wine on the coffee table, some romantic comedy playing in the background that neither of them was really watching. Amara's hands were trembling as she pulled out the envelope from her purse. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head, but now that it was here, she felt like she might throw up. She handed him the paperwork without saying a word. Daniel looked at her, confused, then opened the envelope. She watched his face change as he read. First confusion, then concern, then something close to panic. His hands started shaking. He looked up at her, his eyes wide, searching her face for some kind of explanation. He said, "What is this?" His voice cracked. Amara took a deep breath and told him. She said she had been feeling tired for weeks, that she had gone to the doctor for a routine checkup, that they had found something wrong with her heart. She said the condition was rare, that there was no cure, that the doctors had given her less than a month to live. Daniel's face went pale. He dropped the papers and grabbed her hands, his grip almost painful. He said, No, this can't be real. There has to be something they can do. Another doctor, another opinion, something." Amara shook her head, forcing tears into her eyes. She said the doctors had already consulted with specialists, that the damage was too severe, that her heart could stop at any moment. And then she said the words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She said, "I don't want to get married anymore. I can't do that to you." Daniel stared at her like she had just stabbed him. He said, "What are you talking about? Of course we're getting married. I don't care what the doctors say. I'm not leaving you." He pulled her into his arms, and she felt his body shaking as he cried into her shoulder. And for a moment, Amara felt a wave of relief. He was staying. He loved her. The test was working. But then, over the next few days, something changed. At first, Daniel was exactly what she expected. He was attentive, caring, almost obsessive in his concern for her. He canceled work meetings, rearranged his schedule, spent every free moment by her side. He cooked her meals, held her hand, stayed up late researching experimental treatments, even though she told him there was no point. But then, 3 days after she told him, Amara noticed something off. Daniel's phone started ringing more often, and he would step into another room to answer. He would come back looking stressed, distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. When she asked him who was calling, he would brush it off, say it was work, say it was nothing she needed to worry about. But Amara knew Daniel. She knew his tells, the way he avoided eye contact when he was hiding something, the way he would run his hand through his hair when he was nervous. And then, one night she woke up at 2 in the morning and realized he wasn't in bed. She found him in the living room, sitting in the dark, his phone glowing in his hand. He didn't hear her approach. She stood in the doorway and watched him type out a message, his face illuminated by the screen. She couldn't see what he was writing, but she saw the way his jaw clenched, the way his fingers moved quickly, urgently. When he finally noticed her, he locked his phone and shoved it into his pocket. He said, "Hey, what are you doing up?" Amara asked him who he was texting. Daniel hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. He said it was his brother, that he was just venting, that he couldn't sleep. But Amara didn't believe him, and that's when the doubt came flooding back. What if this test was revealing something worse than she imagined? What if Daniel wasn't the man she thought he was? The next day, she decided to follow him. Claire thought Amara was taking things too far. She said, "You faked a terminal illness, and now you're stalking your fiancé? Do you hear how this sounds?" But Amara didn't care. She needed to know the truth. So the next afternoon, when Daniel said he was going to the office, Amara got in her car and followed him. She kept her distance, staying a few cars behind, her heart pounding in her chest. But Daniel didn't go to the office. He drove to a small cafe on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and indie music playing too loud. Amara parked across the street and watched through the window as Daniel walked inside, and then she saw her, Jessica, the woman from the photos. She was sitting at a corner table, and when Daniel approached, she stood up and hugged him. It wasn't a quick, polite hug. It was the kind of hug that lasted too long, the kind that made Amara's stomach turn. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, watching as they sat down and started talking. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see the way Jessica reached across the table and touched Daniel's hand. She could see the way he leaned in, the way he smiled at her. And then, just when Amara thought she couldn't take it anymore, Daniel pulled out an envelope and handed it to Jessica. Jessica opened it, looked inside, and her face lit up. She said something that made Daniel laugh, and then she hugged him again. Amara felt like she was going to be sick. She started her car and drove home, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. When Daniel came home that night, she didn't say anything. She just watched him, studied him, trying to figure out who this man really was. And that's when she made the decision to take the test even further. Amara told Daniel her condition was worsening. She said she had collapsed at home, that Claire had rushed her to the hospital, that the doctors were running tests. Daniel's face went white. He dropped everything and drove to the hospital where Marcus worked, the same place where Amara had gotten the fake paperwork. Marcus had agreed to help her one more time, to set up a fake hospital room where Amara could stage the final test. When Daniel arrived, Amara was lying in a bed, monitors beeping around her, an IV in her arm filled with nothing but saline. She looked pale, weak, like she was fading. Daniel rushed to her side and grabbed her hand. He said, "I'm here. I'm right here. You're going to be okay." But Amara could see the cracks. She could see the way his eyes kept darting to his phone, the way he seemed distracted, even now, even when she was supposedly dying. And then, while Daniel was sitting beside her, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his face changed. He stood up and said, "I need to make a call. I'll be right back." Amara watched him leave the room, and as soon as he was gone, she motioned to Claire, who had been standing in the corner. Claire handed her Daniel's jacket, which he had left draped over a chair. Amara searched through the pockets and found his phone. Her hands were shaking as she unlocked it. She knew his passcode. It was her birthday. She opened his messages and scrolled through, her heart pounding. And then she saw it. A thread of messages between Daniel and Jessica. But they weren't what she expected. They weren't love letters or secret plans. They were about money. Jessica had written, "Thank you so much for this. I don't know how to repay you." Daniel had responded, "Don't worry about it. Just focus on getting better." Amara's breath caught in her throat. She scrolled up, reading more. Jessica was sick, really sick. She had been diagnosed with cancer, and she couldn't afford the treatment. Daniel had been sending her money. That's what the envelope was. That's why he had been so distracted, so secretive. He wasn't cheating. He was trying to save someone's life. Amara felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She put the phone back in his jacket just as Daniel walked back into the room. He sat down beside her and took her hand again. He said, "I'm sorry I had to step out. There's just a lot going on right now." And Amara realized, in that moment, that she had made a terrible mistake. Amara couldn't keep it going anymore. The guilt was eating her alive. She had tested the man she loved, and in doing so, she had discovered that he was better than she ever deserved. That night, after Daniel left the hospital, Amara called Claire and told her she was done. She said, "I have to tell him the truth." Claire said, "Are you sure? Once you do this, there's no going back." Amara nodded. She was sure. The next day, she asked Daniel to meet her at the botanical garden where they were supposed to get married. She wasn't in a hospital gown anymore. She was dressed normally, standing near the fountain where he had once told her he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. When Daniel saw her, his face went through a series of emotions: confusion, relief, and then something darker. He said, "What's going on? Why aren't you in the hospital?" Amara took a deep breath and told him everything. She told him about the fake diagnosis, the test, the paperwork, the hospital room. She told him about following him to the cafe, about reading his messages, about discovering what he was really doing. She said, "I'm so sorry. I thought you were cheating on me. I thought you were pulling away. I didn't know you were trying to help Jessica. I didn't know you were being a hero while I was being a liar." Daniel stood there frozen, staring at her like she was a stranger. And then he said the words that broke her. He said, "I know." Amara blinked. "What?" Daniel laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter, exhausted. He said, "I've known for 2 weeks. Marcus told me." Amara felt her world tilt. "What are you talking about?" Daniel said. "Marcus felt guilty. He called me and told me what you were doing. He said you were faking the whole thing to test me, and I decided to play along. I wanted to see how far you would go. I wanted to see if you would come clean on your own." Amara's legs felt weak. "So, all of this, you knew?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I knew, and I stayed anyway. I played the part of the devoted fiancé because I wanted to believe that you would realize how messed up this was and stop. But you didn't. You kept going. You faked being in the hospital. You invaded my privacy. You didn't trust me, even when I gave you every reason to." Tears were streaming down Amara's face now. She said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But Daniel just shook his head. He said, "I don't think sorry is enough this time. The invitations were burned, the deposits forfeited, the dress donated." Amara moved out of their apartment and stayed with Claire for a while, trying to piece together what was left of her life. Daniel went back to work, threw himself into his projects, and stopped answering her calls. For weeks, Amara replayed every moment in her head, torturing herself with what-ifs. What if she had just talked to him? What if she had trusted him instead of testing him? What if she had been honest from the beginning? Claire tried to console her. She said, "You made a mistake. People make mistakes." But Amara knew it was more than that. She had broken something that couldn't be fixed. She had taken love and turned it into a game, and now she was paying the price. 3 months later, Amara was sitting in a coffee shop when she saw Daniel again. He was with someone, not Jessica. A new woman. They were laughing, holding hands, looking at each other the way Amara and Daniel used to. Amara felt a sharp pain in her chest, but she didn't look away. She watched them for a moment, and then she got up and left. Because sometimes the hardest part of losing someone isn't the absence. It's knowing that they moved on, and you're still stuck in the wreckage of what you destroyed. Jessica recovered, by the way. The treatment worked. She sent Amara a thank you card months later, not knowing the full story, just knowing that Daniel had helped her when no one else would. Amara kept the card on her nightstand, a reminder of the man she had lost and the goodness she had failed to see. So here's the question that haunts this story. Was Amara wrong for testing Daniel, or was Daniel wrong for playing along when he knew the truth? Some people would say Amara was manipulative, that she sabotaged her own relationship by refusing to trust. Others would say Daniel was equally at fault for turning her test into a test of his own, for watching her spiral and doing nothing to stop it. But maybe the real answer is simpler than that. Maybe love isn't supposed to be tested. Maybe trust isn't something you prove with games and lies. Maybe the moment you feel the need to test someone is the moment you've already lost them. Think about it. Would you have done what Amara did? If you had doubts about the person you were about to marry, would you have talked to them, or would you have set up a test? And if you were Daniel, if you found out your partner was faking a terminal illness to see how you'd react, would you have stayed and played along, or would you have walked away the moment you found out? These are hard questions, and maybe there are no right answers. But this story teaches us one thing. Love without trust is just fear dressed up in affection, and fear will destroy everything it touches. Amara learned that the hard way. So let me ask you one more time. If this happened to you, if the person you loved tested you like this, could you forgive them? Or would it be over the moment you found out? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if this story made you think differently about love, about trust, about the risks we take when we let someone into our hearts. And if you made it this far, if you stayed with us through this entire story, hit that subscribe button. Because we have more stories like this. More truths that will make you question everything you thought you knew about relationships, loyalty, and the human heart. Thank you for watching. And remember, the people we love the most are often the ones we hurt the deepest. Don't let fear make you the villain in your own love story.